Yeah.
Thank you.
Now we are live, I guess. Hello,
Okay.
everyone, and welcome back. We are wrapping up the last hour of Cyber Talent Week. What a week it has been. I mean, a stretch. And the last mile. So thank you, Diana. Thank you, Norma, for closing us off. And as we have spoken in the last several days through this conference and the Talent Week, we have given or tried to portray the diverse career paths that we have. And sometimes it's very straightforward for folks who have gone a straight line in technology, but not necessarily everyone. I think most of us have a very circuitous way of getting into cyber, and all of your successful cyber leaders. I wanted to use this forum to share some of that. I'm sure those that are joining us and those that will be learning beyond this panel could use this as a great resource for navigating their career. So welcome, and let's start a little bit of introduction. And Norma, maybe start with you.
Sure. My name is Norma Crayam. I'm Vice President and Chair of the Cybersecurity, Privacy, and Digital Innovation Practice at Van Squik. I can't talk today. Van Squik Associates. I'm so excited to be here.
Diana Kelly, 30-plus year cybersecurity veteran, and right now I'm on the executive board at Cyber Future Foundation, and I'm on the board of directors at WESIS.
Excellent. And then both of you have access to a lot of, I think, cyber opportunities right now. And that is something that definitely we'll touch upon. And let's look at your careers in general, and then we'll see how we navigate through that. So Norma, how did you get into cyber, and how did you get to the position that you are now?
You know, Diana and I were talking for a little bit right before this, and this question about how did everyone get to where they are is such an interesting one, right? Because I don't think that there was any, massive intent when I was, 12 years old and came to DC, because I was 12 when I came to DC, for what that path would be. I started in the federal government, working at the U.S. Department of Commerce and the International Trade Administration, working on export controls and export finance. But it was interesting, I started to learn the national security underpinnings of what we really cared about from an international trade perspective, and then went on to different agencies, the Department of State, FEMA as a consultant for a very short period of time, and then the Department of Transportation. I was the Deputy Chief of Staff at the DOT, and I was the Deputy Administrator at the Federal Railroad Administration. And when I tell this story, people say, where's the theme? How did you actually go from these things? And what I say is I've made my parents happy because I saw the connectivity. And for me, the connectivity was about national security issues, global geopolitical engagement, and how we do it in the United States, and critical infrastructure. And I'll say this, when I was at the Department of Transportation, I actually had to deal with Y2K. And a lot of people will say, that was a snoozer. But when you work at the Department of Transportation and you think about aviation and rail and maritime and potentially planes falling out of skies, what it taught you in all these examples was to think strategically about what risk meant. And the last thing that I did that really helped, I think, in my path is I worked on what we call continuity of operations and planning, or COOP, and continuity of government, right, or COG. And when you do that in the federal government, your job is to war game what happens if you literally had to reconstitute another government. And when you go to secure facilities and you realize you would be living underground and you're trying to think about what connectivity was to the rest of the world, it was really that moment for me when I was with our people. And I said, if we are locked down and you can't communicate, what will we do? How are you actually implementing a new shadow government if you can't talk to anyone? And our emergency preparedness people in 1999 said to me, what are you talking about? Of course, we'll always be able to do everything that we want to do. And I said, no, we won't. And actually, fast forward, I left the government. I went to the private sector. I created a Homeland Security practice in 2003, right after 9/11, right? Safety, security. And then I wanted to look ahead. What was the next big risk? But what could I do? How could I help? Because what I loved in my public service was the helping part. Yeah. And so what I did in the private sector is I created a cybersecurity practice in 2005. And I will say this, and we talked a little bit, and I'll go to Diana. No one understood what that meant. But my first client was really in the defense industrial base. The banking financial services sector was second, and the electric utility grid was third.
So there was an underpinning of security and risk management, of course, some level of crisis management that we are all dealing with in this space, right?
That's right.
Absolutely. So
That's
great.
right.
Diane, how about you?
Yeah, before I launch into my story, I wanted to pick up on something that you just said, Norma, which was about why 2Ks felt like a snooze for a lot of people. So I was at KPMG in financial services at the mid to late 90s, and it was pretty much all Y2K as a practice.
Right.
Like that was a huge part of what we were doing. And it's a good illustration for anybody that's listening that didn't live through Y2K. So for the Gen Zers out there, it was just that everybody, when they first started coding years, we gave them 2 digits. They were 2 digits because it was like, well, it's, 77, 78,
Right.
And then all of a sudden, what was going to happen at 2000? It was going to be, the systems were going to think that it was 1900.
Yeah.
So there was this concern. So there was a whole lot of work and millions and millions of dollars spent. My spouse was at Merrill Lynch Investment Managers at the time. He spent December 31st, 1999, sleeping under his desk, afraid that something. So it was a snooze, but it's a good example of what happens when cyber folk understand a problem and a risk and step in and actually address it in advance, because it was a snooze because all that hard work and prep. So,
Paid off.
and that's how security is that when we do our jobs really well, unfortunately, the net is that people go, well, nothing happened.
Nothing
Right.
happened. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, because we were sleeping under our desks to make sure.
So silent defenders, right?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
We had army blankets and MREs. Not
Yeah,
enjoying that.
there was a lot of prep going on. But luckily, most people, it was just, oh, hey, it was a big nothing burger. Okay.
Yeah.
But so me, how I got in, it actually is almost, I was 12, 13 years old. And my dad was a research professor at MIT Lincoln Labs and got an account onto the DARPANET, which was the precursor to what the internet is, and actually built as a secure communication. What if the phone lines go down? We have the DARPANET. When I got on, I think there were like 32, I saw a picture of it at one point. I think there were 32 systems online on this. So the entire US internet at the time, the DARPA, was like 32 PDP 10s and 11s. And it's kind of hilarious because probably in your houses now with you and your family online, you probably got 32 systems online in your own
per
home.
house.
But so it was very early on. I was completely fascinated. It was the late 70s. And I just loved it. It was, at this point, it's shocking to some people, but we had instant messaging. We had email. It was all green screen, amber screen, but instant messaging was called talk. And we even had multiplayer games that you could do. And I was so excited because I could talk to people in California and talk to people in different parts of the country and do all this. And I thought, this is the future. And I became completely enamored with it. Found a vulnerability with a password log on and just loved systems. And then I went to college and there wasn't much more. I taught myself how to code. Wasn't much more for me to learn from what they were teaching at college. So I'm an English major. I graduated with an English degree, focused on Shakespeare, particularly loved it. Graduated, figured, what does an English major do when they graduate from college? They go into publishing, right? So go into editorial work. So I started working, I'm from Boston, and there's a lot of great publishing houses in Boston. I was very lucky to work at Academic Press, at PWS Kent, which is part of a larger group that's now Cengage. Anyway, but I was always the IT guy. I was the IT guy at all of my jobs. And eventually it got to, I was doing acquisitions of the software to go with the math books that we were publishing, and then training the sales team on how to be able to show this software to the professors. And the head of our network, who was in California, and there's an interesting part of this story you might pick up as in the pronouns, is she said to me, Diana, I think that you should lead the networks in the Boston area. We're putting 3 different companies together in Boston, and we're going to link all of our companies around the country. You should be the person who does that. I said, I don't know, Jen, a little bit scared about doing that. It turns out I was going to earn twice as much as what I was earning in editorial. My boss said, do it. Your job's open for about 6 months. Go try it. So I went there. And then I also got to go to California and meet my boss's boss, who was also a woman. So this is my first time in IT, and I've got a manager and a skip level manager that are both women. I'm a woman, and I'm just thinking, sure, this is what we do. You know, this is normal.
Yeah.
Didn't realize until later
Wow.
on that I was in a very strange situation. So I absolutely fell in love, helped do that networking, went on at different jobs around Boston, still in line until I was at a startup and I built and managed their global network. We had 9 offices around the globe. I did all the security for it. So I like to say I was a CISO before CISO was actually a term, because that's, you know, you're on the IT and all the security for it. You're for the company. And then after I left in line, I got kind of curious about what was going on at other companies. So I had the opportunity to go to KPMG Financial Services during that Y2K moment, which was just eye-opening about what needed to get done. And I think we had somebody on the stage here yesterday who said this: if you have the opportunity to work in a management consulting or a Big 4 consulting firm, do it. You will be on the road. I would leave my house Sunday night and get home Saturday morning. But what I learned and how to approach an engagement and how to manage a project and how to really think about that big picture and talk to a variety of different constituents. There's nothing like having that kind of experience. So I feel so grateful for that. And then my career's taken a lot. I never had a big plan. I always followed what I loved, and that took me as long as I was really passionate about it. So a lot of my career went based on whys. You know, why is this not, you know, working right? Like at KPMG, we had all of the analysts. We had everything. We had Gartner. We had all the expensive analyst reports. A lot of them were actually technically wrong. And this was a time in my life when, like, I just basically ate setting up firewalls for breakfast. And so I could read these reports and be like, yeah, that's not quite right. So why are we paying all this money? How do analysts become analysts? I went and I worked in an analyst firm twice. I was at Burton Group and led their security risk management team, and then also at Hurwitz, the old Hurwitz Group. And then I realized that a lot of what was going on with the analysts was partly they weren't practitioners.
They didn't understand.
But even more so, they were talking to very often the marketing people at the vendor. So I'm not going to say the vendors were misrepresented, because I genuinely don't think there are a couple bad ones. But
couple, yeah.
But most vendors want to get their story out properly. It's just they sort of had an aspirational idea of what their product did. And then the analysts didn't have the tech chops to understand. So I got really fascinated in that. And I wanted to, at that point, then go, let me work with vendors. So I've worked with both startups and with large companies. I led a development team at Symantec, and I was at IBM as their executive security advisor, who also built and managed their security research process. And then I was the cybersecurity field CTO for 3 years at Microsoft. So got that. So I've seen all these different areas and pictures, and it's just always what's next, what's going on, what's interesting. And that's how I've always found my next part of career. So when people come to me and say they have a 5-year plan, I think that's wonderful. But if you don't have a 5-year plan, don't be afraid that you're not going to be able to have an interesting and valuable career.
Right. Yeah. I just want to pick up on that piece. And again, Diana and I were talking about this a little bit before. The concept of people having a master plan, you know, whether you are like the beginning of your career, the middle of your career, or just wherever, you don't actually have to have a master plan, right? I think what people need to embrace is their inner curiosity. We talked about this, where you can maybe see farther or deeper than other people in your field, or you want to do something else. You can do that, right? And whether it's the 21-year-old or the 85-year-old, you know, wherever you are on your path, it's up to you to decide where to go. And sometimes there's a fear factor of doing something different. Like this is nothing to do with cyber per se, but it's okay to do something different. And I think the piece, as I was listening to Diana talk and I was thinking about the different things that I've done, there was no one clear path, like in working in 4 different agencies and suddenly becoming a cybersecurity person, right? But for me, when I thought about cyber, what I wanted to do is help critical infrastructure. And the way that I decided I was going to do that was not to be I'm an IT security expert, because for me, I honestly kind of found that to be boring. What I wanted and what engaged me was to focus on how critical infrastructure is built, run, operated, regulated, and secured. And for me, it's a
Yeah.
combo of cyber physical. And so
Yeah.
for me in my career now, I do that across all these different sectors: defense, banking, financial services, energy, health, communications, IT, and it's all global. And so you learn all these different things, but it's also the connectivity, because look, I'm not going to be the coder, right? But I can talk to the CISO or the CIO in a way that the rest of the company can't. And so I tend to talk to CIO, CISO, general counsel, the business unit, the product people, sometimes government affairs, but it tends to be that I have this product, I need to secure my company. How do we do it? And if I've learned a lesson from the defense sector, I can bring it to the banking financial or vice versa. And so I think, you get more cross-pollination than they might have normally if they're only talking to the same people in their sector.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing that really comes out from both of your journeys is the clear, this communication and the ability to distill like very complicated affairs into something that people can understand and embrace, right? And I think that becomes more important. In both ways, they connect probably together. But policy making is all about clear communication, right? And I'm glad that the English major's journey to become a cybersecurity careers, leader has happened, and of course will happen again and over again. If I were to take a kind of a pivot on each of your journeys, maybe Norma, you can probably shed a light on any milestone that actually solidified that you really want to put the cyber brand on what you're doing, because that is important inflection point. You could do anything else, but you have actually stuck and led it in cyber.
That's a really good question, because when I mentioned I started my cyber practice in 2005, and I spent a ton of time explaining to people that privacy was not cybersecurity, right?
Yeah.
Even information security is not cybersecurity. And it almost forced me into the enthusiasm that I have right now, because the more I talked about it, the more I realized that the people I was talking to really didn't understand it. And we were talking about systemic national security risks. And as I began my journey in these different sectors, I was learning so much. And what I realized was, as much as I needed to make money this moment, the second, what I cared about was the vision that I had to continue to work through it. And, you go from 2005 to today, everyone's like, oh, good for you, right? But I've enjoyed my journey, but I became more passionate the more I saw that people didn't understand it.
Yeah, and then how about you, Diana? And you had so many, so many levels of different exposures, especially from where you started. What was your inflection point?
My inflection point was, you could probably tell as I was talking about how excited I got about the DARPANET, that I just really fell in love with networking. And networking, I thought was the best. So when I got to DataWare, the startup with the 9 offices around the globe, and I set up their network and connected them, I was just so incredibly excited. And it was pretty new at the time, but I was like, hey guys, we can let our customers download patches using FTP. Like groundbreaking. But it was the 90s. And so we did that. I mean, I got them on the internet. And guess what? Somebody broke into the network. They got onto, back in the day, the DMZ, demilitarized zone, or that secure enclave on premise. They got into the server that I had set up because I didn't understand about how to be really defensive. I had built networks to be beautiful and efficient, and assumed that, well, it's just going to be people that we know using them. It didn't occur to me, someone's going to attack this too, and especially once you get on the internet, somebody attacked. So they did, and it was Christmas Eve. And I had sent everybody home except for one contractor, and I was just buttoning things up to leave. It was about 5, 6 at night, and I saw that for our mail server, like the hard drive was completely full. And so we looked in, we saw there was this weird directory. It was called Wares, which are hacked games. And we took it down, and we're like, that was weird. I wonder what happened. Boom, it happened again, and it happened again, and it happened again. And so it took us hours to figure out we'd been attacked, and that the company wasn't going to be able to get email. This is this whole big, basically now what incident response is, but here it was, we were sort of making it up on the fly. And that was it. I mean, I never looked back, because I realized that no matter if I loved networks and I loved what they could do for businesses and humanity, that I had to love security. because they aren't going to be any value if you don't secure them, you don't build them robustly. Someone's going to get in and be the reason we can't have nice things. So that was it. I never looked back. Fun fact though, I did get some counsel from people before I pivoted because I was a network guy and now I was going to be a security person, which what's security? And we didn't even call it cybersecurity.
No, we didn't.
And I got the counsel that I really was making a big career mistake because all the security stuff was going to be fixed. And it literally said to me, who secures the phone? Which I now know there's like phone freaking and SS7 had all these problems. But anyway, they're like, you're ruining career. Don't go into it. And I took that to heart, but I just was so confident that if we don't protect it, it can't be used. We have to. So if it takes us 5 years and we've perfectly protected it, wonderful. I'll just go back to focusing on networking and not security. And as you know,
and I have to, I cannot overemphasize the fact that maybe that is the genesis of the networking in human aspect as well, right? Because we had this awesome session about the modern networking process and all that, right? So networking devices leads to networking, great networking with people.
It's true. You know, and while you were talking about the attackers, right? And this is one of the things I love about just cybersecurity and trying to help companies in critical infrastructure, because you still have to teach them. It's not just, there is no silver bullet, right? There is no set amount of money they can spend to secure themselves. And what I try and do, having learned this in the international sphere, working for the government and doing bilateral, multilateral negotiations, is not only do you have to think like the attacker, right? We teach that in cybersecurity, but trying to make sure the people in the United States understand what geopolitical risk is. Right now, we're having this conversation in the middle of Russia and Ukraine, and so people generally understand it. But what people don't understand is in that great global connectivity and digital innovation, we've just made it easier for the bad guy in North Korea to hop over and come see us, right? And not in a friendly way. And I think in the United States, if you're running a hospital, you don't think about global geopolitical risk, right? And what you have to do is help educate people why they are a target. And it's still hard to teach people that. But I think part of the broader policy and kind of regulatory world I live in is, how do we teach them that? How do we help them understand that risk? And the other piece is, how do you educate the US government and regulators, having been one, right? What is legitimate about regulating and mandating because there is systemic risk, and what is an overreach, right? And that's where I think the policy in cyber and regulatory is so interesting and fun. I know no one thinks that. But I'll stop there because there are many other things we could talk about.
I think, you have thrown, two different angles at it. One is, of course, the tech angle, the other is the policy angle, and both are really challenging. I think, somebody told me that, Val, you went into engineering because you like, especially software engineering, because you like instant gratification, because I like to see my code work, right? However, it's extremely different on the policy side, right? I mean, to see things move at the pace that they move in public policy. How do you encourage and motivate people to stay in that field?
There are many ways you can get people to stay focused, but when they see the Congress pass a bill that will mandate them to do something, I mean, sometimes companies let's say this, owners and operators of critical infrastructure, because they're not all private, they actually need to see sometimes draconian action coming from the government. I'm not recommending that's a great idea, to take the problem seriously. Right? One of the things I always learned as a regulator is that there's a balance between how these work, right? There are public-private partnerships. If I hear the term one more time, I'm not sure what I'm going to do. There is a time, though, when a regulator needs to regulate, and when when owners and operators just need to pony up, that these are challenges. And where you see the best successes when they do that, because the government does not know everything. And so if a bank or utility or a hospital comes in and says, here's how I run and operate, and I'm adding security, if what you want is an outcome-focused event, which is I am more secure and I know when I'm not, right, then this is how it works in the best way. And so I think a lot of entities are trying to do that in a more focused way, but trying to balance out the governmental need and overreach. is challenging. But I think at this point, if you look at what's happening with Ukraine and Russia, I think people understand that they need to engage. And the last thing I'll say on this point is, I want people to understand that cybersecurity policy is policy. I am not talking about lobbying, right? I am not talking about, this sort of view that lobbying is like a one-stop shop and you fix a little thing and you go away. Cybersecurity policy is about enterprise risk management and much broader issues, right? Regulatory compliance and other things. But we have to figure out what that good balance is. And I think that that's tough right now.
Yeah. And the pivoting over to the tech side and the entire journey that you had, Diana, I think at every stop, I think you probably got the option to kind of reevaluate where you are and then move forward. Especially those that have had long cyber careers have had many options to quit and exit and do something different. That will probably gratifying at about that point. But how do you stay engaged and also solve for the longer run, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think staying engaged it just comes part and parcel with the work, because you see what happens. Cyber and IT have become something where it was, we could email each other. That was fun. To software and connectedness are in every single part of our life. It's your television is a connected computer. Your refrigerator is. Your car is one on wheels. And so the importance of it just continues to drive me. I mean, at this point, if you step on the brake in your car, it's very likely you're basically stepping on like basically the equivalent of a game brake, right? It's software.
Yeah.
You're actually communicating to software in the car that's then communicating to the braking mechanism. It's not like it used to be completely physical. This is how intense the software is and the importance in our lives. So just seeing that the fact that when I was at Microsoft, I went out to Brussels quite a bit and spent time with NATO, and it's now a dimension of warfare. So how to stay engaged. So you can, and questions like, well, what if because there's no digital Geneva Convention, what if you bomb a data center that civilians are using?
Yeah.
Is that an act of war?
Right.
Because it's a civilian target, but there could also be government data that's on there, right? I mean, these questions are just, so how to stay in it? It's that the problem has just gotten bigger and more intractable and more important to society. So we got to stay in it. And then where I focus, it tends to be where I think the biggest problem is that I can also do something to help, because your point, you don't want me coding either. I can do it, but you don't want it. It's not pretty. but I'm not good like you are, Val, with that. But so right now, I mean, I'm doing a lot of work with nonprofits and looking at the cyber talent issue, because the issue really is, we do need to have so many more people engaged in it. And I've gotten far enough in my career that I've been very blessed and lucky that I can start really focusing on doing the good work, not just to keep companies secure, but to start thinking about bigger picture about keeping the world secure and countries secure, and helping people advance and get them into this industry so that they can have that same impact and outreach, and hopefully enjoy a job, which, again, admittedly, for people that are thinking about getting into it, some things you do need to know, back to the original part about, what is it, when we do our jobs really, really, really well, that means people are like,
nobody knows,
Yeah.
right?
Nobody
Nothing
knows.
happens, which
Yeah.
is what you want.
so you got to feel really good about that. Yeah.
In the piece too, I think when we talk about careers in cybersecurity, because we've heard so many wonderful stories about how people have gotten into it and done it and things they're trying to fix, is for people to understand that it is interdisciplinary, right?
Yeah.
Do we need software engineers? Yes, right? Do we need policy people? Do we need business people, right? We need the full continuum of people within companies, because everything is about digital innovation right now, to understand cyber. And I don't care if you're 800 or 8. We need to try and train people across the C-suite and within the whole organizations to understand that. And it's not just business, it's in government, right? And I think that we're doing a better job of that. But one of the things we do need to do a better job on policy and technical is to help the engineers and whoever's building the thing understand security by design, right? Because we do have this rush to market. I must create the coolest product, the quickest, and to sell it. And then when you have a conversation with the entity or the engineers and you say, well, where's my cyber? Where's this? I can hack in, that product won't work anymore in 5 minutes. And they say, well, no one told me I needed a secure product. Now, technically true, but honestly, in this day and age, if you're building the cool widget, please put security at the front end, right? About 10 years ago, I was trying to get the healthcare industry and medical devices to focus on cybersecurity. And I would say, if you're making an implantable medical device, you have to, and you're providing updates over Wi-Fi, which horrified me and still does, there has to be cybersecurity in there because someone could die, right? And what we're trying to do is focus. I'm not trying to be dramatic. If you know what the outcome could be, fix it at the front end. Don't put out a product at this point in time that is insecure.
Yeah, no, I think the outcome typically has been that cyber crime has been quiet and silent in the back end, right? As much as we are defending in the back end, I think what has changed is the real world impact on many people, and that has brought us to the headlines that we have. And right now, you just don't have to talk about cybersecurity awareness or investment. You talk about how to fix this. That's what they're the very person who probably told you not to go to cyber can be rolling on his grave, seriously. Interestingly, I think many of us have done this naturally. Now we are asking a lot of newcomers into this space, both who are already in the industry, wanted to make it a career transition, or those that are probably finishing up with the graduate, undergraduate degrees and want to come in. What is your advice for them to for those entry-level people who probably is going to be the volume of capacity because we don't have much, right?
What is our advice?
What is their stand? What are some of the starting points for them?
Why they should get into this career?
Yeah.
It's the coolest, most fun thing ever,
Yeah.
right? You're wargaming about how you're going to protect your country and your neighbor and your parents. I mean, I actually think about cybersecurity this way. If you also want, you'll have a career forever, right? And you can move around. You don't have to do the same job in cybersecurity for the rest of your life. And one of the things when Kirsten Todd was talking, and so do people in the government, the rotation that you can do in the federal government, in the private sector. But if you are, you want to be excited every day that you get up about fixing a problem, cybersecurity is the place to be.
Absolutely. And then your pitch for the cyber career seekers.
Well, I get this question a lot. And my first question is always, what do you want to do? Because people, and if they say I want to do cyber, okay, what in cyber? There's a spectrum of things. If you can be the person who sits at home alone in your jammies. When we were when I was at IBM, one of our recruitment tech, we were like, we could tell them that, they could work in their jammies. Like that wasn't okay. Like, can you imagine the big blue saying like, yeah, you want a job where you can work at home in your pajamas, come join us. But so, what is it that you want to, what do you want to do? Why do you want to do it? But there's a spectrum. We need lawyers. There are lawyers right now. There are folks up on the Hill that are influencing policy so that policy reflects technical reality or ability to actually implement. We need graphic designers, psychologists to help understand the mind of the attacker and also why we click. Right? There's a great professor at University of Arizona, Robert Cialdini, who wrote a marketing book called Persuasion. And it's about how to persuade people to buy your stuff. Well, who do you think probably studied that like it was the Bible? It's fishers, because they are really good at persuading us to buy their stuff. And by that, I mean, click on their links. Yeah. So we have all these different, we need to market to people so that we get more security awareness. There's a panoply of different jobs. So what is it you want to do? And why do you want to do it? And then when you understand that, and I get a lot of, I want to catch the bad guys and make a lot of money. Okay, here then, now you have an idea of these are the kinds of jobs that you can get. Most people who think that, and I've talked to people who came out of 3-letter agencies and stuff, the catching the bad guy part is, I think, a little bit more romantic on TV than it is in reality. But if that's really what you want to do, there is a catching the bad guy element. Doesn't always mean making a lot of money. So sometimes you have to match the what and the why, but I really want to start with people's, what they genuinely want to do and why they want to do it, because then I can help them understand of that wonderful constellation of opportunities
Where
in
they
cyber,
fit.
where it's going to probably be the best fit. And maybe that they go be a venture capitalist, because or run a
Absolutely.
hedge fund that focuses on cyber. That's
Good
Yeah.
deal.
that could be.
Well, that's kind of I think a kind of holistic way of looking at the great amount of opportunity we have for so many people who can join this. But we are kind of out of time today. But I'm sure we'll come back and talk some next day. I'm sure this will inspire a lot of people and also motivate them to join in a very successful career in cyber. So thank you both, Dharma, Diana. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
And
Thank
thank
you.
you for doing this with us.
Absolutely. Thank you.
All right, we're ready for the last one. We'll wrap this up. No, it's just two of us today. Yes.